dead and dozens more injured after bombing attacks overnight in Kabul, Afghanistan. Fox News is told no U.S. or coalition troops were hurt, but many of the victims are students.
Caught red-handed, China accused of illegally selling North Korea oil, defying UN sanctions.
We need to tighten the screws on China now. Obviously, they're not doing their part.
President Trump wins the award for the worst, most negative coverage. This is by Pew Research Center.
In an interview with the soon-to-be married Prince Harry, the former President Obama took aim at President Trump's Twitter habit.
This notion that you're going to attack the president for using Twitter is akin to me attacking FDR for using the newfangled radio to do his fireside chats.
Regardless of where you are, law enforcement officials say, get ready to see security like you have never seen it before all across the country.
That's a song that we've heard before on a show we've done before.
And we have applause for you, Brian, because you're back. And how was Christmas?
Christmas was good.
Yeah.
You guys been here holding down the fort?
I mean, we're trying.
Yeah,
I don't know how well we held it down,
yeah,
but we were here.
I don't know if it was a solid attempt, but we've been trying. It's been hard without you, Brian. I'm sure people miss you. So.
I know. Put it this way. I think that we both know. All of us know that you can't get away from it because this president, especially, the velocity of the news does not stop.
It never slows.
Right, and you guys have been holding it down. I know we're going to be working on and off throughout the whole channel today. But first things first, I think people, before we could say goodbye to 2017, people are still looking at the last president and the first president. And, of course, they're comparing President Obama and President Trump. And it's really an interview that President Obama, former President Obama, did in September with Prince Harry that's making news today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Take a listen.
All of us in leadership have to find ways in which we can recreate a common space on the internet. One of the dangers of the internet is that people can have entirely different realities. They can be just cocooned in information that reinforces their current biases. It's also, by the way, harder to be as obnoxious and cruel in person as people can be anonymously on the internet.
And this was done in September on the Invictus Day.
And it just aired now. There's a little drama over whether or not Prince Harry is going to invite President Obama to his wedding.
He's newly engaged to Megyn Markle.
And all this. But the bigger point here, and that is that this is the first time.
I'm a little disappointed about because now he's officially off the market.
I thought you were disappointed because you weren't going to get an invitation.
Well, I'm probably not.
But this brings up this bigger question here of President Obama totally breaking with tradition. We saw him in Paris criticizing President Trump, talking about how there's no leadership anymore and the U.S. is taking a back seat as it relates to climate change. Now, all of a sudden, not going after him by name, but certainly this veiled reference about Twitter. And it is so different, for example, than when President George W. Bush left office. He said, look, former presidents essentially should be seen, not heard. I'm out. I'm done. I'm going to my ranch. President Obama just doesn't want to leave it.
But it's also sort of hypocritical to come from President Obama because he's one of the most divisive presidents that we have. He was extremely partisan, and you see things like racial tensions increase exponentially under his watch. And so it's not like he was this great uniter that brought both parties together. I mean, he was a very divisive president.
But we do know that President Trump's gone after President Obama quite a lot. And President Obama went after President Bush a lot, but there just was no retort. Dick Cheney went after President Obama a lot. President Bush, 43, would not do it. 42 and 41 got along pretty well, but Bill Clinton was critical.
It seemed to always take some time. President Trump pointed this out on Twitter. I think we've got the tweet for you guys here at home. I can't see that.
Well, all right. On January 20th, the day Trump was inaugurated, an estimated 35,000 ISIS fighters held approximately 17,500 square miles of territory in both Iraq and Syria. As of 12/21, the U.S. military estimates the remaining 1,000 or so ISIS fighters occupy roughly 1,900 square miles. That was President Trump tweeting out, talking, and this is one of the things he's been hammering home, promise made about destroying ISIS. We had a lot of sound bites yesterday of going back through that. Promise kept now. Mosul defeated, Raqqa defeated, ISIS on the run.
Right, and President Obama's supporters would say, hey, I got that started. I was starting to put the coalition together. But this president changed the rules of engagement.
Yeah, really.
And we've also seen, I think, that the 98% of lost territory from ISIS, 50% of that's happened over the past 11 months alone. So, I mean, there has been great grounds made under President Trump. And President Trump, as you guys remember, President Trump ran on rolling back President Obama's legacy. That's what he campaigned on. And he sure has followed through with that. You look at the individual mandate, gone. The Obamacare contraceptive mandate, gone. You look at even on policies like immigration, going after sanctuary cities, something so different than President Obama. The Paris climate deal that was a cornerstone of President Obama's legacy. Moving forward on the pipelines, Keystone XL, Dakota access pipelines as well. You look on something like trade, pulling out of TPP, net neutrality regulations, which is supposed to be the end of times. Fortunately, that hasn't happened. We're still here.
But here's the problem. If you go out, I think President Trump got to do what he says he's going to do. But if you go out and say, I'm just going to undo my predecessor, then if President Trump loses in 4 years or 8 years, the next guy or woman's going to come in and go, I'm just going to undo the other one.
Sure.
I mean, at some point, I think President Trump's tweet right before Christmas, it leads to that point. You got to say, okay, enough about the other guy. Let's start doing something across party lines so they don't unravel
You can say that,
it.
right. But it was in 2016 that President Obama was still looking backwards and going, well, I couldn't get everything done because of... It may not make it right,
So
but it may make it politics in America.
But there are legacy items that will likely live on. You look at the tax reform law. It is very doubtful that the Democratic Party, even if they come in, are going to want to roll back tax breaks and these tax cuts for 80% of middle-class families. So it simply likely is not going to happen. And particularly if he gets something done on infrastructure or some of these other things that he's pointing to.
Infrastructure is hard to dismantle,
those legacies will live on. So surely the pulling back the deregulations, another president can come in and load on these regulations
put it
once
this way.
again.
President Trump would do a lot better in the next few years if he doesn't go out after President Obama as much. Don't put your chin out 365 days a year. I think it'll help his overall approval rating and help other Republicans if that's what he's looking to do. And I think President Obama's got a great way about him. He's got a presence about him. So he's personally very popular. What you do is you go after the policies if you want to maximize political gain, in my humble opinion. But when people were asked about what top concerns for this year, I'm fascinated to see that health care, number one amongst Americans, according to this poll. Second is taxes, which, of course, was just addressed.
Right.
Now, immigration, 27%, climate change, 18%, education, economy, racism. Trump is a major issue, unemployment, which is record lows, and terrorism, which is being attacked. But health care, that is
such a key.
Mitch McConnell said, leave it alone, Mr. President. I think we should not touch it. We got burned in 2017. President Trump said a couple of days ago, oh, yeah, I'm going back.
Well, he says leave it alone for repealing. He doesn't talk about stabilizing the marketplace because we have Senators Alexander Murray and as well, or Senators Alexander and Murray, who have come together with a subsidy piece of legislation. Senator Susan Collins was promised a vote on this for her vote on tax reform.
It'll pass.
So Mitch McConnell is saying, I don't want to move forward with Obamacare repeal, but he's not saying he doesn't want to do anything on Obamacare. But for those Republicans who wanted to see repeal happen, of course, you have every right to be disappointed because you're likely not going to see that.
Well, the president would argue that repeal happened when the individual mandate was repealed. But, Brian, that poll brings up a really important point, and that is Americans now view Republicans as owning health care. 48% say that's the most important thing. They now own it, essentially. They tried to do something with it, didn't work. Then now you have President Trump saying, hey, we lived up to our deal. We repealed the individual mandate. You're going to have another whole 9 months now of people seeing what happens to their health care costs. And then it's Republicans who are going to be responsible for that in 2018.
I don't look at the mandate as unraveling Obamacare. I don't look at the Republicans owning health care. I think Republicans are responsible for making health care affordable. And if they put something forward, if it's the Murray, I haven't looked at that close because we went over it so quick and we switched gears quickly to taxes. But the Murray-Alexander compromise would pass the Senate if you put it there, and I'm not sure it would pass the House if you put it out there. But that would mute the call and get people working together. There's nothing more personal that lacks politics more than health care, because if you get cancer, we're going to be talking about this later, if you got a cold, if you're going to the doctor, you twist an ankle, there's no politics in the waiting room.
They're all personal, and God knows that the New York Times and every other news organization loves doing stories where they highlight those people. They also love highlighting individual immigration cases, and that was another thing that was on this list. 27% saying they thought immigration was the top issue. Now, you've got these liberal governors both on the East Coast and the West Coast. Jerry Brown Cuomo here in New York, really defying the president in federal immigration law. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo pardoning 61 people ahead of the new year, including 18 immigrants. And what's different is that we always see pardons right before the Christmas holidays. But in this case, both Brown and Cuomo very specifically saying this is about politics. This is about defying President Trump. I am the protector of President Trump. Shocking or not shocking that both of these guys have ambitions for 2020.
And we also saw someone like Rahm Emanuel, mayor of Chicago, who is also defying President Trump with immigration policy, specifically sanctuary cities. So I do think, you know, a lot of this is setting themselves up for future ambitions, wanting to run again. And then they can go to their liberal base and say, I was the guy that stood up to President Trump. I was the person who fought for you, fought for you Hispanic voters. And so that's really what a lot of this is about for some of these folks.
You just got to decide what's more important, an American citizen or an illegal. You want them housed here. You want them taken care of here, using all the social money for people that aren't officially here. So that'll be a very blunt Republican and Democrat issue, how they view illegal immigration. But Jillian Mealy, no doubt about it, you just shined from 5 to 6. Can you keep it going?
I'm going
from
to
6
try
to
my
9?
best, only because you're here today, Brian. It feels like it's been
You
forever.
wouldn't have tried for Lisa and Leland?
Maybe not so much.
I'm a little
because you're here.
I'm a little hurt, Jillian.
You got to make it special when Brian's here. I mean, that's how he rolls.
We're trying. Leland and I are trying.
His ego doesn't need any more help.
All right, we do have some serious news to get to, though, starting with this Fox News alert. At least 40 people are dead and dozens more injured in what's being called a crime against humanity in Afghanistan. Multiple attackers storming a Shiite cultural center and news agency in Kabul. At least one suicide bomber setting off his device in a packed crowd of students. Fox News is told no U.S. coalition troops were hurt. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack, but ISIS has been setting up attacks on Shiites in recent months. The happiest place on earth is back up and running after a massive power outage. Some Disneyland tourists were stranded for more than 20 minutes on rides as workers fixed a transformer issue. The outage affecting more than a dozen rides during one of the park's busiest weeks. A majority of those attractions back up and running within 60 minutes, but some were down for 5 hours. Millions of Americans from New York to Las Vegas will be under the highest level of security as they ring in 2018. The NYPD is beefing up its counterterrorism unit in Times Square as 1 million people pack in to watch the annual ball drop. This comes on the heels of a new threat from ISIS, urging fighters to kill drunk partiers. Nevada lawmakers also approving more than $350,000 for New Year's Eve security in response to the Las Vegas massacre. Law enforcement not the only ones preparing. Crews in New York City just finished installing nearly 3,000 crystals on the Times Square ball. That looks good there, doesn't it, guys?
Yeah, pro crystal.
You are pro
Yes,
crystal?
I'm pro crystal.
We can all get on board with that.
Thanks, Jillian.
Yep. Thanks, Jillian.
Meanwhile, 13 minutes after the hour.
All right, so is America headed for a showdown with China? What our spy satellites just caught them doing?
And the other foreign policy hotspots to watch for in the new year next.
Plus, just when you thought you've heard it all from the PC police, turns out farmers markets are racist.
Everything is.
Yeah, I wonder how that...
All right, get this. U.S. spy satellites reportedly capturing images of Chinese ships illegally selling oil to North Korea. And this happening dozens of times in the past few months from companies that were sanctioned by us. So what does this mean for our relationship overall with China now that we have pictures to prove it? Here with more, and including a breakdown of the foreign policy hotspots likely to be prevalent in 2018, Fox News foreign policy analyst Kyron Skinner. Kyron, first off, when it comes to China, this is damning, right?
Absolutely. What's so damning about this is the fact that the UN Security Council resolution on North Korea in September prohibits ship-to-ship transfers of oil products to North Korea. And if China is either looking the other way or outright approving this kind of activity, it puts the Chinese government in violation of that Security Council resolution and, in fact, makes it a supporter of illegal smuggling. But furthermore, it makes it a supporter of North Korea's nuclear blackmail program.
Right, and the fact that we know about it, that we want the rest of the world to see what we see, which is an interesting ploy, too. North Korea, of course, this is what it's all about with North Korea. If we could start cracking down and letting those sanctions sink in, they were the #1 issue for President Trump in 2017. Will it be in 2018?
Yes, it will be, and the president needs the Chinese to be an honest broker in this process, because most of North Korea's petroleum products come from China, and if China could comply with the various UN Security Council resolutions, it would absolutely hurt the North Korean regime.
Right.
So the administration is going to be front and center on both China and North Korea.
Russia's got to step up too, and Russia has to stop. And there's indications that there's some of their nuclear scientists are the ones expediting their nuclear program. Next, when it comes to ISIS, we need to blow them out once and for all out of Afghanistan and destroy them as they head towards Damascus in Syria. Are we going to?
Yes, absolutely. The military defeat of ISIS is a #1 issue in the new year as well. There are probably about 1,000, no more than 3,000 ISIS fighters left in Syria and Iraq, but the fact that there are any left is of concern. The territorial defeat of ISIS is not enough, because ISIS has spread to other countries and is doing enormous damage and has the potential to do more. For example, it's in Sinai, the Philippines, Libya, Yemen, parts of the African continent, Afghanistan. These are the hot spots of the world. ISIS is not the only extremist group there, but it's inspiring those that exist and others as well.
But the perception was a year and a half ago that they were winning. Not many people think they're winning right now. There were thousands in Afghanistan. Now there are hundreds. And the same thing with in Syria. So at least it's trending in the right direction. And finally, a key move. We decided to send lethal weapons to the Ukraine as they fight on in Russia. Now they will begin to pay more of a price, don't you think, the Russians?
Absolutely. The Russians are going to face a level of lethality that they haven't seen in the crisis in Ukraine with the U.S. deliveries of anti-tank weapons and the U.S. commitment to shore up the Ukrainians as they attempt to stay a sovereign nation, in fact.
Right. It's going to be interesting as Vladimir Putin pretends to have an election. Chiron Skinner, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, straight ahead. This mom arrested for carrying her gun even though she has a permit. Now she's taking her fight to Washington to make sure this doesn't happen to you. She'll join us live next. Plus, more bad news for the NFL. Mark Cuban knows a thing or two about a bad deal. He says he wouldn't invest in the league. It's going in the wrong direction. Do you believe him? Welcome back, everyone. Some quick terror headlines, starting with a Fox News alert. An ISIS fighter, he's got an American accent, thought to be American, is calling on Muslims, there he is, to living in the U.S. to carry out terror attacks. The chilling propaganda video shows an unmasked man holding a pistol, telling supporters to take advantage of U.S. gun laws. He also has crutches, so it looks like we heard him. It was not clear where or when it was recorded. And a supermarket bombing now listed as an act of terrorism by Russian President Vladimir Putin. He got a homemade device who was packed with shrapnel tearing through the store in the city of St. Petersburg. 13 people were indeed hurt. No terrorist organization has claimed responsibility. Remember, Putin called President Trump earlier this month, thanking him for a tip that helped stop another Russian bombing, which would have been an act of terror. Let's go over the rail and downstairs to Leland and Lisa.
And here we are, a Pennsylvania mother taking her battle for gun rights all the way to Washington.
Yes, we've got Jeanine Allen, who was arrested after she crossed state lines into New Jersey. She's from Pennsylvania. She had her gun with her, and she was unaware that her concealed carry permit wouldn't transfer between states. She spent 48 days in jail, and after appearing on Fox and Friends about 3 years ago, she eventually got pardoned by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie a year later.
Allen is now calling on Senate Republicans to pass the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act that was just passed by the House. Joining us now, Jeanine Allen. Jeanine, nice to be with you. Good morning. A lot of support in the House of Representatives for this. It's a much heavier lift in the Senate, especially considering you got to get to 60. What are you hearing from Republican senators about the chance of this actually getting through the Senate?
Well, I'm not here much nowadays being a mom, but I know right now that we basically have to get this bill to the Senate, and right now they just basically need to put their money where their mouth is and just get on the top of this bill. These officials, they came into office, they sworn on, made an oath on the Bible that they would uphold certain laws and do different things for the people, and they're not doing it. So they need to either get on board or get out of office.
Jeanine, you spent 48 days in jail. You said that you're a mother. Clearly that had an impact on your family. Can you tell us a little bit about, what happened and the impact and the toll that's had on you and your family?
Well, it's had a big impact. My kids, I drove into New Jersey to throw my 3-year-old a birthday party, and I had my firearm on me, and I explained to the police and let them know that I'm licensed to carry and I have a firearm on me, and they immediately arrested me for 48 days. My kids have been going through a lot because every time I walk out the door, they don't know if I'm going to be taken away from them when I'm carrying to protect myself and protect them. And ultimately, the reason why I bought a firearm, a lot of people may not know this, but I got robbed twice in the same month in Philadelphia in front of City Hall, where there are a lot of police officers, and I still got robbed, and I bought a firearm to protect myself and my children. So to get arrested a week later without even using the firearm.
And that was a week later after you were
robbed. A week later. After I was robbed, I purchased this firearm and got arrested for 48 days.
Jeanine, this is something that we've heard from the president about. He's a big advocate of the Second Amendment. This is something the NRA is certainly in favor of. They said it's a real priority, and pretty amazing that this is the first piece of sort of meaningful gun legislation after the massacre in Las Vegas is something that actually increases people's Second Amendment rights. You support President Trump not only on this but other things. Give us a sense of what you think of his leadership on this.
I do support Donald Trump. A lot of people may not know this as well, but I was there making phone calls in the beginning when he was running and trying to do everything that I can to get more people to vote for him. I can't comment on everything that he's doing right now because I try to stay away from TV as much as possible, but I thank him for what he's done. He's bringing change. That's what I wanted. By me being 31 years old and being able to vote for a second time in my lifetime, I can see the change, and I'm looking for the future. And by him being on this bill, hopefully, I hope he will sign this bill. I know he will because he's pro-gun. And I got a chance to go see him at one of his rallies, so very excited to see what's going to happen.
We're glad you're safe, and we appreciate you sharing your story with us. So thanks for being here this morning.
All right.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Have a good day,
Jeanine. Jeanine, yeah. We'll see if she's in the Rose Garden, if this makes it through the Senate to be there for the bill signing.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, well, coming up, illegal immigrants catching a brand new break in California. The new move as the state moves towards sanctuary status.
And we showed you this yesterday a couple of times. Vanity Fair suggestions for Hillary Clinton's New Year's resolutions.
This is a good one.
Take up a new hobby in the new year. Volunteer work, knitting, improv comedy, literally anything that'll keep you from running again.
But not everyone thought this was funny. The fallout and what Vanity Fair is doing about it next.
It's time to start working on your sequel to your book, What Happened? What the hell happened?
Get someone on your tech staff to disable autofill on your iPhone so that typing an F doesn't become Form Exploratory Committee for 2020.
Take up a new hobby in the new year. Volunteer work, knitting, improv comedy, literally anything that'll keep you from running again.
To finally put away your James Comey voodoo doll. Now, we all know you think that James Comey cost you the election, and he might have, but so did a handful of other things. It's a year later, and time to move on.
So cheers to you, Hillary Clinton.
Cheers to you, Hillary.
So this is pretty funny. And we were watching this yesterday and showed this video yesterday. Vanity Fair staffers taking some shots across the bow at Hillary Clinton. And, you know, they've been an advocate of hers. They've been very supportive of Hillary Clinton taking a shot here. Her supporters aren't taking it so well, though, Brian.
Because I guess they're posing it as it's sexist to tell her to take up knitting, and maybe you shouldn't go after somebody who was vanquished and lost, because for the longest time the narratives have been because the thing was rigged or the Russians played a role. Yeah, so Vanity Fair got all this backlash. Considering that for the most part, they've been really just jumping all over President Trump, I find this astounding.
Well, not only that,
funny.
There were people burning their Vanity Fair magazines and saying they were going to cancel their subscriptions. And it shows you what the outrage will do. Vanity Fair caved in less than 24 hours. This is what Vanity Fair says. It was an attempt at humor, and we regret that it missed the mark.
When have we ever heard a response like that from, you know, late night comedians or Saturday Night Live that have taken numerous shots at President Trump or his family and his staffers as well? We've never, and they've gotten backlash. They've taken it way over the line with things like Kellyanne Conway, some of those skits, and never have we once seen them forced to apologize or say, hey, maybe we crossed the line here. But of course they do it for Hillary Clinton.
Well, noteworthy though, it was the people who were getting angry at Vanity Fair are the people Vanity Fair care about. They're all the liberal celebrities that they cover and that they do stories about. Those are the ones who are tweeting about it, and suddenly you had that from Vanity Fair.
There'd be a great deal. They'd get more subscriptions if there would be an equal opportunity offender, and that was attempted humor, and let people be the judge. Now let's move on to the NFL versus the NBA. Mark Cuban was asked, hey, now that the Carolina Panthers are up for sale and P. Diddy shows some interest, what about you? And you know, you want to get into baseball. In the past, you've talked about getting into football. He said something I find somewhat disingenuous.
Really? Why do you think it's disingenuous?
Wait, Mark Cuban disingenuous? Let's put the quote up and we'll let everyone decide. This is what Cuban said. Why would I buy an NFL team if I think the league is in decline? There's no team I would want other than the Mavericks. Certainly no football team in the universe. There's not even a close second. And what I am going to say to my son and his friends, or my daughters and her friends, oh yeah, football is dangerous, but for you, but I bought a football team. I know I'm a hypocrite from time to time, but I really, really try not to be. You don't buy this, Brian.
Yeah, why do you think it's disingenuous?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, you have a league in the NBA that is trending upward. I give them tremendous credit for taking their problems. In the past, they have Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich comes out against the president. That's fine. That's after the game or before the game. But when you watch an NBA game, you don't see politics.
Yeah.
And for the most part, they were all standing during the national anthem. They had an issue 10 years ago. They handled it. So LeBron James, very anti-Trump, but he does it after or before the game. He doesn't put it in your face. I think what the NFL did is hurt itself by Kaepernick taking a knee and then others following in his wake during the game, making everyone talk about it. But if you look at the trends, the NBA is trending up, but it's a 1.8. The NFL might be down 9%, but it's still getting 6.7. It's not even close in terms of value.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the rating numbers in terms of how many people are watching.
Popularity and value.
That said, though, the ratings have been tanking, as you point out,
down 9%.
Down 8%, and the NFL has canceled the final Sunday night game of the year. You don't cancel things if they're doing really well and you don't think you can put something better in place.
Compared to the NBA.
I think this whole thing is just a shame, though, because you have so many hardworking Americans who are spending their hard-earned money just to go to a game, to take their kid to a game, to enjoy something. Politics has infected every aspect of society these days, and people just want a break. They just want to have fun. They want something light. They just want to enjoy a Sunday with friends, a girlfriend or boyfriend, taking their kid to a game, and then now it's been infected by politics. I just think it's really sad. It's very disappointing.
There's a couple of things. You have the problem with the head injuries coming to a head this year, pun intended. And you also have a situation where more work has been done than ever before. Number two, a lot of stars have gotten hurt this year. Really hurts the league. Headlines of Sports Illustrated said carnage. It's true. That hurts the league. And number three, that with the kneeling. I would tell you the NFL is the most valued franchise in the entire world. It's much more valued than the NBA. and Mark Cuban would jump at a chance to get in if that opening. The owners would not give him the franchise because he's too flamboyant, too out there.
They've got a lot of owners who make a lot of news. Speaking of news, Jillian's here with some headlines for the morning.
And also, just real quick, I don't think Sunday Night Football would be canceled if it weren't New Year's Eve, because historically ratings aren't well on New Year's Eve anyway. So
fair point.
Just to throw that in there.
See, we've got some sports people.
I rest my case.
They're going with deal or no deal instead of the NFL.
Yeah, right?
It's true.
Well, we'll see how that rates. Anyway, guys, we do have some news, and we do have some brand new 911 calls just released showing the chaos following the deadly Amtrak derailment. Survivors begging for help in Washington State.
911, what are you reporting?
We've been on an Amtrak train accident. We're south of Tacoma, north of Olympia. Tons of people are hurt.
It's an overpass, and the train is hanging off the overpass. It's landed on vehicles. There's bodies laying everywhere.
3 people killed and more than 100 hurt when the train flew off the tracks and plunged into traffic. The NTSB still trying to figure out why the train was going 50 miles over the speed limit. Illegal immigrants catching a break in California. The Orange County Sheriff's Department will no longer check inmates' immigration status. Deputies also will not alert ICE agents of undocumented offenders. This in coordination with the so-called Sanctuary State bill that goes into effect on January 1st. It essentially prohibits local police officers from helping enforce immigration laws. Well, you can now add farmers markets to the list of things liberals consider racist. 2 professors at San Diego State University slamming those markets, calling them, quote, white spaces where the food consumption habits of white people are normalized. They also claim markets cater to rich households, which raise property values and displace people of color. Well, the force is strong with this one. Take a look. A grandma has the time of her life playing a virtual reality Star Wars game.
Wow, like him!
You go. Granny wearing goggles and holding a lightsaber, fighting the character Darth Maul in her grandkids' video game. No word, though, on if she was able to beat the famous villain. But regardless, she is having the time of her life.
Yes.
Looks like it, yeah.
Yes. I never watched the Star Wars, so I don't even know what.
Yeah, I got nothing.
I don't either.
I haven't either. So we're all failing on this. We're going to get a bunch of text tweets, I think.
And yet we all had to say we have nothing. All right. President Trump, well, he got his historic tax reform passed, but that's not exactly how Democrats see it.
You've got to pay extra attention to what he does because he's a bait and switch con man.
Wow. So will these brutal remarks backfire on the left? Debate next.
And the congresswoman accused of stealing a first-class seat on a plane has a long history of behaving badly. She was once called the meanest member of Congress. Her bad reputation revealed coming straight ahead.
44 minutes after the hour. Hope you're having a great morning. Quick headlines now. A cancer risk that could be lurking in your child's makeup. Claire's is pulling 17 makeup products off store shelves nationwide after they tested positive for asbestos. A Rhode Island mom discovered the chemical after sending her 6-year-old daughter's makeup kit to a lab for testing. And your video game habit might be a major health issue. The World Health Organization is poised to add gaming disorder to their list of classified diseases next year. It could be diagnosed if gaming impairs with functions like things of personal relationships, education, and even your job.
President Trump's tax cuts already paying off. Experts predicting an economic boom and a surge of new jobs. But that's not stopping Democrats from attacks like this.
I've said all along that that this president is a con man. He gives you something that might sound sweet, but you know it's going to be bitter in the end. And so you've got to pay extra attention to what he does because he's a bait and switch con man.
But will smears like that backfire on them? Here to debate it is former managing director of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Taryn Rosencrantz, and GOP strategist Chris Prudhomme. Hey guys, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Thanks for having us.
Hi. Taryn, I want to start with you. So the Tax Policy Center, a liberal group, or at least many perceive it as a liberal group, are saying that even a family of a family of 4 making $75,000 could save an estimated $2,000, perhaps even more, depending on the age of the children. So Do you really think, is it Democrats' plan to go out on the campaign trail and say that that's not a good thing?
Absolutely, because we're exposing what's really going on. The reality of what you just said.
Tax cuts?
Wait, I'm sorry, wait, let me say, the reality is that over 80% of these tax cuts go to the wealthiest 1%. That means billionaires, okay? So we want to make sure that we say that the truth is that in the short term, there may be a small gain for you, but over 53%, it's 53% of all Americans will actually face a tax hike, while the big corporations and the millionaires and billionaires will continue to have that permanent tax cut. There are many Republicans and Democrats who will have to answer to this plan, because the truth is, the reality
hold on
is
just one second,
hardworking Americans are going to see a tax increase. Let's just make sure that's clear.
Taryn, hold on. But you also know that the reason why there's those sunset provisions is the fact that Republicans were using the reconciliation process. And do you really think that Democrats, after that time span is up, do you really think that Republicans and Democrats are going to be on board with not letting those tax cuts continue?
Well, I think Republicans and Democrats will have to answer to the $1 trillion in debt that they added to these tax cuts for big corporations and millionaires, not for hardworking Americans. I absolutely think they're going to have to answer to the impact that 53% of Americans will face a tax hike. So don't be fooled.
Well, Chris, I want to get you in here. Chris, I want to get you in here. Because despite what Taryn is saying, we also know, again, the Tax Policy Center, as I had mentioned, a family of 4 saving $2,000 or more. They say that 80% of Americans, middle-class Americans, but I said why. 80% of Americans are going to see, middle-class families are going to see tax cuts. The only problem Republicans have right now, though, Chris, is that Wall Street Journal is saying that only 17% of Americans know they're getting a tax cut. So what are Republicans going to do to get that message out? And are you worried that Americans aren't going to know heading to the midterms that they're going to see a tax cut?
No, so I'm certainly not worried about that. And look, you said it best yourself. The reality is this. Here's what it comes down to. There are certain provisions that does not allow the Senate to extend it past 10 years. And that's what the American people need to understand and know. They're making this elaborate scheme sound like it's something so bad. And that
but is it working?
Well, so I think the messaging does need to obviously be more effective, and I can tell you there are organizations such as Koch Industries and Freedom Partners who are going out there planning tours to do this. And look, here's the bottom line. People are sick and tired of this nonsense, of this rhetoric. You can play politics all day long on the Hill, but don't play politics with the American people's lives. People want to start seeing things get done, and look, they finally have something accomplished. This is tax reform, and it affects all incomes, all tax brackets, and that's what this is most importantly is about. And that's the true message. I tell people all the time, don't listen to me, don't listen to anybody else. Speaker Ryan said it best. Take a picture of your paycheck today, take a picture of your paycheck in February, and that speaks the difference. Whatever amount it is, it's all saving something. It's extra gas in your tank, it's extra groceries, and it's extra money to pay additional bills. That is what it comes down to. This proof is in the pudding, and it speaks for itself.
Well, one thing that we all know is we're going to be hearing more of this, and so, soon we'll see how this all plays out. But I appreciate you guys joining us this morning, and have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, guys. All right, well, the congresswoman accused of stealing a first-class seat on a plane has a long history of behaving badly. She was once called the meanest member of Congress, not a good title there. Her reputation